So it's my pleasure to facilitate this conversation today. I think, in the way of theater, which is my discipline and I know a shared love, I'd love to begin by you two offering up a story about the prompt, right? In terms of a moment of failure, overcoming failure, or a moment of imposter syndrome, right? And again, overcoming that, right? So if you would be so kind and gracious, right, to start from that place of vulnerability with sharing a story, I think that'll launch us into the conversation well.
I'd like to start. Yeah, I know usually we do age before beauty, but no, there's so many ways that I could start to talk about just a story or my story, but just sitting in this seat right now is such an honor. And I'll start the story with me being 18 years old, studying theater performance at St. Clair Community College, and then dancing with Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, second company. Never taken a ballet class in my entire life up until that point, but I was at the bar, and there was a gentleman who was teaching the ballet class and stopped that whole class for a lecture. Now, in the beginning of that lecture, I'm standing there like, okay, I guess this is what happens in ballet class. But what this individual said at that bar has stuck with me for my entire career professionally, touring the world, theater shows, dancing with so many different companies. But what he said was, it doesn't matter how good you are, how passionate you are, you have never arrived. And the moment that you feel like you've arrived, everything has died within you. So never feel like you have arrived. And that stuck with me, and it's full circle for me because I'm sitting next to that person on a panel, 10 years later. And it was such an amazing experience because I've been able to come across so many world-renowned people. I'll never forget meeting Ariana Grande in Tokyo, Japan, or even having the honor of my father being in the room right now, but touring and having these experiences with the group Zap, who pioneered funk and music here in the city. And when it comes to failures, I think one of the biggest failures for me was believing that I was being upstaged or overshadowed by the legacy and not being able to embrace that. And I'd say that was a failure for a while because every time that a door has opened up for me, it's because the legacy preceded me. And just recognizing that it doesn't matter how old you are, your wisdom, your experience, and being at the table will always overcome whatever you believe you can't do. So having 25 years of experience is mind-blowing because I'm 29. And sometimes I think, I've been at it for a while. And I think when you get into a space, being an artist and, especially now being a, Gen Z or millennial, and everything is based off your social media stats and how many views you have on YouTube or subscribers. And sometimes the talent and the raw, just sharing your story through your art, that gets overlooked. And to recognize that doesn't matter because if you could touch one person and break strongholds and heal them with your story, whether that's you speaking to them or dancing or putting it in a song to tell them exactly what has happened to you, I think that is where the reward comes from. I just came off of a tour where every night was 10, 11,000 people in arenas. The last show I did was this weekend at the Suns Arena. And to see the joy on that many people's face and know that it's because they're enjoying music, but they're enjoying that spirit that's coming from the stage and returning it, that's the reward. So, I just wanted to tell that story because these two gentlemen have had such an impact on my life and career.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow. So my students do listen to me. This is, it's like, there's that moment as an educator where you go, are they catching my message here? Is this coming through? But it's really nice to know. And I was very sincere about it, and he took it to heart. And it's nice to be able to sit with you and realize that mattered, that what we say as artists and arts educators and people in the community, people are listening, people are paying attention. And so that's just really gratifying. I feel like I have like a win today already before I even start talking. Yes, it's all good. I'll start with a failure. And this is the reason why I told that story, is the fact that before I stopped dancing, I felt like I had reached the height of dance in a company and was doing my thing. And I had an opportunity to dance for someone I respected and admired, but I treated it as if I've got this in the bag. And my name wasn't on the cast list for her role. And she pulled me to the side and said, "This is your wake-up call. You phoned in that bleeping audition for me. How dare you? How dare you think you have it in the bag? How bad do you want it?" I said, "Badly." And she said, okay. She recast it, which meant game on, which meant I had to deliver everything I had. I left that place sweaty, sopping wet, sometimes crying, because she was not going to let me forget. You got cocky, and I'm going to teach you a lesson. So, and I was grateful for that. That was my failure. That was a failure of common sense, a failure of respect. There was a failure of respecting the art and the art form that you had spent your life doing. You got complacent. You just can't walk in with a cocky attitude thinking, "I got this, I own the place." Well, guess what? And that was a real lesson. What was the other question?
So that was it. You answered it. Right?
Okay.
In terms of thinking about
Yeah.
either or, you got to pick, right? Your imposter syndrome or a failure. So yeah. I'm just struck by a couple things that were said, so let's come back around. So, in the kind of Eastern mystical tradition, right, a very common mantra that gurus often give to their disciples, right, is, "I am home, I have arrived." And yet, right, we have to balance that as people always in process and as people always becoming, right? We have to balance that with reckoning our continued growth, right, into the mix, right? That there is a way in which, yes, we are home already, we have already arrived, but also how do you continue to evolve your artistry, reach new audiences, connect with new collaborators, not get too comfortable, not phone it in, right? So I'm struck by those stories, and that is a constant balance for artists, right? You have the audacity to assert yourself, right? Right. And yet you have to show up in your full humanity, acknowledging, like, I'm still in process too, right? So, and how beautiful it is, I think, when artists can actually do that. And I think the most effective art, the most effective dance pieces, the most effective visual art is when you get to see that crack, right? It's like, okay, they are fully human, showing us their full humanity, right? So for me, that means watching dancers get to a point of exhaustion and hearing the breath. I love those moments of stillness and breath in the midst of movement, right? So let's think a bit more about how you two strike the balance. How do you strike the balance? The audacity of knowing you have something to say and I'm an artist, I'm putting it out there, while also acknowledging you're, becoming, you're in process, you're engaging a conversation, right? Love to hear answers on that. Any ruminations? You take it?
I can go first. Okay. That balance, that's such a great statement, because it's really, and from a dancer's perspective and an art-making perspective, you really are constantly working like on a high wire or imbalance. it's really managing the imbalance. It's managing being able to pivot in the moment when it goes horribly south, and when the colors don't match, the things, the dancers are not gelling, the piece is not coming together the way you envisioned it. Are you articulating your message right? You're starting to go through the catalog. It's like the Rolodex of how I effed it up in the process, and how do I fix it real quick because it's on you. And so you're constantly going, you're doing that, and still trying to maintain forward momentum. That is the number. That is like the biggest thing. It's trying to find how to keep the imbalance from becoming a disaster. Because I also think that it's not a failure of intent. It's a failure of something else. And so a lot of times we get into the sense like, I failed, no one saw the art, or no one appreciated the dance piece. You're going to make another one. Right. You're going to get up, you're going to try this again. And so is that a failure it's not your intention is not to fail. Your intention is to keep exploring. Well, really, it's like if you don't pick it apart like a forensic scientist and pick it apart from a technical standpoint, but also a spiritual standpoint, where were you coming from when you made this piece? Was it a fully formed thought? I mean, those kind of things. And so that's kind of how I think about that imbalance, and because I work in so many different disciplines, because I'm working in visual, I'm working in media, I'm working with dancers, I create things in environments and spaces. Then I'm collaborating with other people and they're making their work. So I'm constantly in a whirl. Who am I in this versus who am I with these people? So it's constant give and take. I know that some visual artists have a tendency to work solitarily, in solitude. And I don't know what, and I work in solitude with the works I work. So but that's where I find it's also exciting. That's what keeps it alive, because it's not balanced. It's off kilter. My life, a lot of color, I'm unbalanced and off kilter. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, that's good. There's so many places I can come from with this, because I think as artists, especially when you're creative, and like he said, being in different disciplines, not just dance, but in music, in theater, transitioning to new places. Right now I'm in a transition to film and TV. And so figuring out, what does balance look like? Does that really exist for you as an artist? Because, when it's coming from an authentic place and that's how you express yourself, that's how you heal, that's how you really move through the wisdom that you've acquired on your journey. It's like, what is the balance? And I think one of the things that I recognize in this last year and a half, especially with, pandemic and having no choice but to sit down. Like, I've been active my entire life, and to be made to sit down, just like, of course physically, but also spiritually, to say, hey, you've been avoiding some trauma. You've been avoiding really humbling and dealing with yourself for 22 years, homie. So it's time to sit down and really deal with that. And to understand, like, first and foremost, wealth of your mind, financial wealth, those things don't matter if your health is not your greatest wealth. And so self-care is important, because sometimes you have to take a step back. Back in November of last year, I was like working 18 hours a day. I just started, a business, and I was working on several projects and like a tour and new music and all of these things. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get up at 5 and get my workout in. I'm going to eat breakfast. I'm going to make these phone calls, and I'm going to switch gears at this time, and I'm going to take a nap. And, I scheduled an hour of rest or recreation time, and I felt good about that.
And we do all do that. I do
Yeah,
that as well.
like, okay, I'm either going to play video games, I'm going to play, I'm going to watch Netflix for an hour, and then I'll get back to the day. And something happened to me in the midst of that. Actually, my grandmother passed away, my mother's mother, who lived with me, and I was helping my mom take care of her. And when that happened, I was spiritually prepared for it because of what I had to go through from March until that space. And what I recognized is when she passed, that for all of the tragedies that I've experienced, and some of them were self-inflicted for sure, is that I would avoid dealing with my emotions by pouring myself into a new project. And some of my best work, dance pieces or the best songs that I've written or the best performances that I've given have come from me pouring my pain into the project, but really sitting down and being able to take that self-care too. Because when you do that shadow work, when you really look at the things like, okay, all of these different tragedies and traumas have happened, and I was the common denominator. And sometimes it was based on the circumstances of other people, but what was my role in that? And when you start to identify that, it takes so much courage because you're not dealing with people, you're dealing with you. But the fulfillment of that is that you transition into having grace for other people. Because one of my favorite quotes, it's an African proverb, and I heard it from Les Brown. It says, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. And that was back in 2016. That planted a seed for me to get to this place that I'm at now. And so I think finding that balance has a lot to do with taking moments of rest and being still, especially for a dancer, actor, like somebody like me. I've been hopping off the walls. I never played with toys as a kid. Since I was a child, this is it. Listen, Mom, come watch this show. And I think being able to be still and now intentionally meditating and praying and spending time with myself has allowed me to find that balance, and it's inspired new work. So, yeah, I think, that's the answer.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you talk about the age that you are. I mean, even at 56, it's still these questions. Yeah. And I used them when I was your age. I used to think, okay, I'm going to hit my 50s, I'll have all the answers. And then and then I was like, someone should have told me that there were going to be even more questions that have to be asked. And I was like, come on. I was like, and then you start to realize it's constant questioning. It's constantly, it's going to be, I think that I have accepted the grind because I'm 56. Like, okay, I know I got up this morning, I got in a workout, I took a piece of quiche over to my 91-year-old neighbor. Yeah, I'm going to still take care of my elders, and then I got up and I'm going to cut this paperwork, and then I have this meeting about a piece that's going to be done for someone else. Then I'm going to come here. Then I'm going to go to a board meeting. Then I'm going to say, hey, honey, I cooked dinner, and then then I'm going to start choreographing for class tomorrow. And I used to rail against that, kind of like I'm constantly going, but then I realized, but this is what you said you wanted to do. like, bro, you kind of picked it. It wasn't like your parents had a different vision. They were like, if you had been a doctor, my mom would have probably been a lot happier. But I think it's just that kind of recognition that is the grind so horrible when you're doing the thing that you were put on this planet to do, and can you accept that grind not to be a grind anymore? Mm-hmm. And I struggle with it every day because there's a lot of cussing in my house at the computer. Yeah, and so, and I think also too with COVID, I think we kind of learned that this 18 months of not just a slowdown and just kind of getting, we were talking about it a little earlier about, we used to meet and greet other artists and hang out and kind of get new ideas, and then you don't have that anymore, and you're kind of stuck. Unfortunately, you are stuck with yourself, and then you start to realize, oh yeah, there's some things that need to be worked on and addressed, and so that becomes a part of it as well. I mean, and then you have responsibilities. I mean, because I work for many bosses. Yeah. I always put that in my head. I work for many bosses, and I work for Think TV, and I do a TV show, which never saw coming. And I talk about art and culture, so it's all full circle. But it's just the whole notion that I'm responsible for that as well. And it's not, I can say it's just a show, but I'm an African American man on television, and that has a responsibility as well. And that's been pointed out to me on numerous occasions. And so I have to recognize that as well. Carry that plus all these other things. I'll try to do it with the grace. Sometimes I don't. The F-bomb comes out. I'm not going to do one now because I don't want FCC coming after us. But that's the gist. Yeah.
So I work with the youth, right? I'm a professor at UD, and so in a lot of ways I think they keep me young and informed and hip.
Right now we
and hip to it. And what I'm noting in the difference of these answers, right, is a generational difference. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to say, right, there's a way in which those of us who went through our higher education, let's say earlier, okay, have this way in which we've internalized the grind. Very much how you just suggested, right? We've had to come to peace with our grind because we're this far in now. If we didn't come to peace with it somehow, right, we wouldn't still be here, right? And yet, for all of us that work with young people, I think there is now a rejection of the grind as we've known it. For good reasons, right? And so specifically in thinking about the theater discipline, for example, right? You know, we really have romanticized overwork, right? Just think about Tech Week. Anyone who knows what Tech Week is typically like, you know, it's exhausting. And we wear it like a badge of honor, right? At least we have. But now, we have a cacophony of voices rising up in the industry saying, no longer, right? We don't need to actually have neglect of our mental health and our physical well-being in order to be in this career. That shouldn't be required to be an artist anymore. And we can change the way our industry does Tech Week, right? Will it mean radical rethinking? Yes, right? But I think that work, right? That wave is now gaining momentum in ways that I think are really valuable. So I wonder, what are the radical ideas, right? So to people listening and people in the audience, they might want to know, what are the radical takeaways, right? What are the ways that you see artistry evolving? What's the leading edge of artistry as you see it? So what would your advice be to somebody who's young, to somebody who is talented maybe in multiple disciplines like you all are? What do you see as the best advice to give to an artist who wants to preserve their humanity, sense of self, overall well-being and health, and also thrive as an artist? What should they do? Where should their focus be?
You go first. Yeah.
You kind of hit a word that I've been working on just for myself, and that's to thrive. I think the very first thing is to understand, whether you're already doing this or you're coming into it, is that you do not have to operate in survival mode, because survival mode will burn you out. Like, oh my gosh, when you feel like, I have to do this. And, you know, I experienced that just last year. Like, okay, I have to work for 18 hours. It's like, do you? Who told you that? Who projected that onto you?
Exactly.
Like, no, you don't have to be that way. Like, really, if you want to get into discipline, then schedule time for you to relax. Whatever that, like, I like to play 2K on PlayStation. That's relaxing for me. So I'm gonna take 2 hours out of the day and play 2K or scroll on social media or watch America's Next Top Model. And that is, you know, that's my show. I'm on season 5. If you're a fan, it's on Prime Video.
You have to have that. I mean,
Yeah.
And the thing is, take it out of the land of the preciousness of being an artist and elevate into being that word artur. Yeah. Like, I'm an artist, so therefore I'm only going to have a Kambanje, and I don't want to talk about postmodernism. I'm post-postmodern. Hey, shut up.
What are you talking about, man?
No one cares. Yeah. No one cares about that crap at all. Please stop.
Absolutely.
It just makes you look like a pretentious boob, and I'm just gonna literally walk away from you.
Mm-hmm. That part.
I'm like,
for real.
I don't have to listen to you anymore.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Can it just be beautiful? Can it just be engaging? Like, that scared the crap out of me. Mm-hmm. You know, that's it. Sometimes it's just take it to the baser, visceral.
The simplicity
of
life.
What your human emotions is when you see something or you experience it. Yeah. I mean, I think that goes hand. Sorry.
No, that was great. And I think another thing, you know, when you talked about kind of the generational gap too, is for people who are my age or younger, is that, you know, with the way that you're able to learn and get experience, I definitely encourage people to go to school if that is what your heart's desire, not because, a teacher or your parent or someone says that you have to go to school, because I went to 2 universities. I went to Sinclair Community College for 1 semester, and my professor, Gina, who was there for 30 years at that point, she erased all of my spring semester because I told her I was touring, I was dancing with DC. She was like, you're passing, but you're just getting by. Why are you missing so much class? I never told her, like, hey, I'm actually Hannah Montana right now, like, on tour. And she's like, listen, I've never told anybody this in my entire career, but go. Yeah, and she said, go get your experience because you have a gift. She said, school will always be here if you want to come back, but go get your experience because that's going to be the best teacher for you. You're already in it. And I was like, all right, say less. That's what my generation said, say less. And then I went to Full Sail University, and I did a lot of my classes, but that same year in 2015, Zach was on a world tour that I had no idea about when I started school in March, and we were in Europe, we were in Japan, we were in the islands, like there was so much touring, and it wasn't that I didn't want to do my work, but the internet overseas is a little different, so I had to stop that, and I recognized, like, anything that I would have learned in the classroom, I still would have had to spend as much time as I have getting the experience after the classroom. So why not be in it and fully submerge yourself in it? And with the wisdom that I have now, understand that I don't have to wear myself out because that's what I've seen around me for my entire life. Like, no, do it and allow it to be peaceful, simple, fun for you, and embrace the grace that people, who are older and kind of set in that pattern, like, have grace, but also try to encourage them, like, hey, there's a different way for us to do this and enjoy it and not feel so stressed out at every moment, whether that's in dance, because dance, this is a whole nother, but I will say this, dance is the hardest thing in the world to me, and just like being in these different disciplines, dance, like as a dancer, you have to be an actor, you have to be a musician, you have to be an athlete, and you don't get to talk most of the time, so there's a different discipline there.
It's a different discipline, and I love the fact that you talk about, like, when you talked about the fact that, I was thinking about this, you had already access to the experiences, and that's the other part of it. It's like, what do you already have access to? And I think that's, if I had to give advice to an artist, it's like, okay, stop. Like, okay, what do you have access? Who, what, where, and all those questions you have to ask. Do you already have access to now? And take inventory, and it's less of a question of like I got to build up this, these friendships and these connections and networking. I got to network and I do all these things. Instead of saying, hey, slow my roll. Like, my neighbors like my art. My neighbor is also a woodworker. Could I go in their shop and build the frames for my thing? Hey, my uncle is building my frames for my artwork. Because I went and said, hey, Uncle Nick, you've built roofs. I have questions about birchwood. And it turned into, hey, if you do this and we do that. And it turned into a family thing. Like, it became like the whole family got involved. And now I have to make artwork for everyone in my family on the family discount. And so I was thinking about that. Like, that's just that what you're saying and what I'm thinking about is accessibility. Did you have access to things already that if I didn't think about when I was starting to dance, that I had access to, that I ignored. And as I got older, I went, oh, had I just gone over to Miss Bess, this would have been a lot easier. Ask questions, yeah.
Ask questions, yes. And so I think that, a takeaway from what you're both saying is, in terms of advice, is yes, give grace, right? But also you need to advocate, right? You need to tell people what you need. And because, frankly, and quite truly, they may have just never considered a different way, right? And they may just thank you and say, you know what, you're right. Maybe we don't need to have any more 10s out of 12s for this rehearsal process. Maybe we, right?
Maybe we can get it done in 2 hours as opposed to a 4-hour rehearsal.
Right.
Like finding and negotiating those things, and also to recognizing the humanity of the people that you're working with. Do I need to be dictatorial? Do I have to be that stereotypical screamer?
No.
And I was never. I'm afraid I was never that. I mean, I just personally like, look, you got to love this. This art. The art form itself is grueling. Why don't we just smile and say, oh, we're having a tough day. Well, okay, we'll ease it up, and then, because the thing is, you're going to come back to dancing. It's not like all of a sudden you're going to stop being the artist or learn. All of a sudden you're going to lose that ability to do 3 pirouettes. really? You're not going to lose it. You'll be fine. Tomorrow's another day, and then move on. But you encounter so many people who don't appreciate the humanity of who they're working with, and they don't appreciate the time and effort of someone, even if it's something that you may not like or agree with. At least be gracious enough to say, it's not my cup of tea, but hey, someone out of 7 billion people on the planet might like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've both spoken to as well the kind of way in which being an artist is sometimes about the stops and starts, about, not a linear trajectory necessarily, right? It might be you do school here and then you go on the road and then you do some more school, right? So I think that the way in which you can access that and embrace the kind of fluidity of an artist's career, right? I think people would benefit from hearing, what is it that you say yes to, right? And why? Because I think for a lot of young artists, you're at a place where you're seeking those collaborators, right? You're seeking mentors. And so how can they pitch projects, right? How can they pitch a collaborative artistic endeavor that would be attractive to someone who's more established, right? What do you say yes to and why? What are the parameters that attract you to want to work with someone and collaborate with someone? What do you look for in artist collaborators?
You work on a lot of different.
Yeah, I think the very most important place to start is to say yes to you, and to say yes to the boundaries that you've established with yourself. Because a lot of times as artists, we make promises or vows to ourselves that as soon as an opportunity that looks better than what we said our discipline was going to be with our path, that comes along, and then you say yes, and then you have to forget about the things that you've already put in place for yourself. So I think saying yes to yourself first and foremost, and if something does come up, how is this going to benefit you? Is there going to be a value exchange? And sometimes you have to think about, okay, what is the purpose of this? And if you go into, a meeting or into a conversation with someone with one intention, and it kind of turns to something else that will lead to that intention, then you say, okay, you know what? Let's move forward with this, since this is the priority. And, maybe that's for 3 months or for the next 6 months, that this is the priority, but this is a collaboration, a relationship, a friendship that I want. Let's start there, because that's going to grow. And whatever we're able to exchange from that point on is only going to grow. So if we're trying to go to the top, whatever the top or whatever success looks like for you, let's do that together and build relationships. Because I think sometimes,
and enjoy that and enjoy it. Because you are collaborating, and it's going to be moments where it's going to be clash of the titans, and there are going to be differences of opinion. You've got to really want to enjoy being in that space with the other person or other people. And so you've got to take that into account when you're coming into a collaborative process. Is that, do you enjoy hanging out with this person? Because we know art making is not all of a sudden, you can sometimes, it doesn't take 10 minutes to do some things. It takes hours, it takes days, it may take weeks, months, it may even take years. Let's be honest, do you want to be in the room with that person? Absolutely. Yeah, that's the number one. Yeah.
5 minutes, all right. So I do want to open it up for questions for our last bit of time. I think, the advice we just heard was so beautiful, right? You got to say yes to yourself. You got to seek your joy, right? And also you need to find reciprocity in collaboration, right? You should be growing in that process of collaboration and feel like you're contributing at the same time, right? So that's what my takeaway is from that last round. But I'd love to hear, what are questions that you all might have for these two artists in our midst? Yes, in the back.
I've been thinking about something a lot this week, and I've been wondering, especially for Rodney, you live in Dayton most of your life, right? The entire race. Yeah, so you probably know a ton of people here that you've at least worked with or known. How do you, especially now that we get out of the pandemic and stuff and talk to artists, how do you decide who you work with and decide who you follow on Instagram or follow? Because I feel like there's probably too many people to like even interact with at this point in your life.
You know, well, it's that qualitative thing, that ephemeral thing. You just kind of know in your gut, this person's kind of cool. They made me laugh. Or I was intrigued by how they put something together on Instagram, or I'm intrigued by how they put their work together. And there's some people that I love and appreciate that I don't see or come in contact with all the time, but I have a lot of respect for. Crystal Michelle Perkins, I'm like a fanboy, and I still go, oh my God, you are just, I can't even tell you I love that woman. I mean, it's embarrassing. And so, but I know that when I see her, it's going to be a great, friendly, peer-to-peer relationship. Like, we're going to get something from it. I'm like, hey, we're going to catch up, and I'm going to get inspired. She's going to get inspired. We're going to egg each other on. Do you know what I'm saying? So you're just going to know. And so, you just have to just say to yourself, who is going to go? You can't determine how far the relationship's going to go. You just have to start the relationship. The relationship will go its course.
Absolutely. I think, he covered it very well, but just also understanding, like that, the first thing you said is like that gut feeling or that intuition, like psychologically, you kind of know if you're going to be able to like someone between 7 seconds and 4 minutes. So it's going to resonate with you. And I think a lot of times, because of so much in the media and so many things that are projected onto us in various ways, trust is almost given up front when you're building a relationship. The only thing that really sabotages or takes away that trust is when someone does something that doesn't resonate with you. So you kind of open up and, like, I'm going to give this person a chance. I want to get to know them. I want to get to know their mind. How do they operate? And can we go to whatever level we go to? Because you could say, I've had so many different teams trying to make it in the music industry. It's like, yeah, we're going to go to the top. And they were only using me for my last name and my artistic mind, but they never brought anything authentic and pure to the table, you know?
That authenticity.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you'll, like I said, when I say you'll know when it runs its course, it's like that some people, especially when you collaborate, you may collaborate with them once, but then you haven't collaborated with them again for another 10 years. You're like, I miss collaborating. Let's get together. We need to do something. It's because you have whatever the duration of your life is, the duration of your life, to reestablish, reconnect, disconnect. So it's going to be a lot of those things, and that's just all. It's just the way it is. And so, yeah.
Great. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? Comments? Yes. Go ahead.
I got this in Chicago this summer. I saw it and I was like, oh my God, it's green. Yes.
And we didn't plan
yes, yes.
Like match color schemes.
And you got to, and you got to. Thomas and I are quite fashion hounds, so let me know. And I have to do, I'm a fashion hound on the show, so if you watch the show, you know. Good Lord, where did you get that sweater? Yeah, I'll go for it. I don't care. I almost had one of them.
Please give them a round of applause.